Welcome to the afternoon session. My goal for this session is to define these three terms, ICE and stun and turn. If you have been around current Cisco Expressway or Cisco collaboration deployments, especially we're talking about MRA and we're talking about the Expressway CE pair, you will have heard these terms, ICE and stun and turn. And what do they actually mean? And how do I want to do these, and how do I do these? What are the requirements? So I'm going to take these one at a time. I'm going to start by giving you like the brief graphic, which is like the best one, and then we'll walk through each one individually. So defining, and then again, what's the impact of the media flows? This is going to be mostly a talkie. I don't really have much in the way of demonstration for this particular one because this is my goal for you is to be able to understand the terms well enough so that when you read documentation, it makes sense. Okay, so here is the short answer. If I have two endpoints, and they're showing two hardware endpoints, but if I have two endpoints that are outside my enterprise, and I've got my Expressway CE pair, right? Expressway CE, for anybody who does not know, is a pair of servers. One lives in my DMZ, one lives in the enterprise. The enterprise one, which is my Expressway C, talks to Call Manager. And the Expressway E has an internet-facing side. There's usually a firewall on the outside too, just to be clear. It's not like you're going to leave that hanging in the wind. And then I create what's known as a traversal tunnel between these two systems. This is called mobile remote access. It is one of the functions that can be performed by an Expressway CE pair. And here is what this does. I have two outside devices. I have my Jabber client on my PC and I'm sitting at Starbucks. I would like for these devices to be able, through the magic of the internet, to be able to register all the way to Call Manager and get all of my services. If I'm sitting at Starbucks with my Jabber client, I want to be able to make phone calls and see presence information and use my little voicemail tab and do chat and all that good stuff. So how do I do that? Traditionally, I have had my PC set up a VPN with some kind of an edge, an ASA or whatever. And then I have my traffic flowing through that. There are some significant problems with doing that. So this is what mobile remote access does. Mobile remote access allows me to have my Jabber client, or in this case, a hardware device, using DNS, discover that it has the ability to connect to this Expressway E. And it sets up a encrypted communication using certificates, because your Expressway E is going to have a certificate signed by a public certificate authority. So it is verifiable by my PC. It is verifiable by my phones. So it's encrypted here. The Expressway E then will turn around and will decrypt it and then encrypt it again to send it over this traversal tunnel between the Expressway C and the Expressway E. Why? Because I'm going to have a big fat firewall right here. I don't want random outside devices reaching in and talking to my Call Manager directly. But if I set up this traversal tunnel, it is encrypted. It's on a port number or several, depending on exactly what you're doing with the tunnel. And it is point to point, which means I have a very minimal, very predictable thing that I have to punch through my firewall to get the C and the E to connect, and then all the traffic can pass through it. The Expressway C now will decrypt things like signaling and send it over to Call Manager. Now, I will say too, that at no time does your phone ever directly talk to Call Manager or your Jabber client. The information is relayed. It is brought into the Expressway E, and the Expressway E relays this information. So from a security standpoint, this actually works really well. So now, that is mobile remote access in a nutshell. And the reason I talk about it is because when we're talking about ICE and stun and turn, we're talking about not the signaling now, but what happens with the media path. So, standard. The first place, so I have a signaling path. Let me grab green here. pink will work. I have a signaling path going between Alice's phone, right? And it's going to be signaling over to call manager. And I have a signaling path going through Bob's phone, and that's going to call manager. And, you know, no matter what's going on, Bob calls Alice, Alice calls Bob, Bob does whatever, that signaling path is always going to flow through call manager because all devices signal through call manager. Great, okay. So Bob calls Alice. Now, Bob and Alice may be sitting side by side at a remote office, you know, or maybe they are two people who are at their two home offices, you know, could be down the street from each other, could be in two different cities, but, you know, off-prem. So the signaling, again, flows over this encrypted tunnel, and then the C sends it to call manager. And I can make this encrypted too if I want to. But what about the media path? Once Bob calls Alice, I now don't only have my SIP signaling path, I now also have an RTP negotiation. What IP addresses do I use? What information do I advertise about the two endpoints? As far as, you know, my enterprise is concerned, the business-to-business user agent, the B2B UA, is sort of the stopping point. That's where these things all are. And in fact, when Bob's phone and Alice's phone register with call manager, the IP address they're all going to register with is going to be the internal IP address of the Expressway C. So as far as the, you know, call manager is concerned, they're the same IP address. So when call manager tells Bob's phone to talk to Alice's phone, it's going to say, hey, Bob, send your media path, your RTP stream to this IP address, which Bob will understand is inside the Expressway C, and tell Alice the same thing. And so the media path, and this is standard if you're doing mobile remote access, secure tunnel for network traversal. The media path follows this green line. It's going to go in to the Expressway E. The Expressway E is going to turn around and send it to the Expressway C. And the Expressway C is going to be part of the signaling for this call. And the Expressway C is going to go, oh, hey, this RTP path from Bob needs to go to Alice. I can do that. And so it will be the relay point. It will be the anchor connecting the two legs of the call. And so then the RTP stream will now move out of the Expressway C and hit Alice's phone. And if you have mobile remote access, you are already doing this. Stun is about just tunnel traversal for data pathing. It is actually not unique to collaboration. You can set up stun tunnels between just two devices to be a tunnel over the internet for that matter. But when we think about it most often these days, we think about it in terms of collaboration. And if you have set up mobile remote access, it's happening by default. But look at this. First of all, I have this traversal tunnel. It is a certain amount of bandwidth. And that bandwidth is bandwidth that I am now, basically throwing away. If I've got an outside entity talking to an outside entity, why would I want it to flow this extra, hunk inside my network? That's just making that connection busy, right? And it makes things slower. I have to have that traffic go all the way through the E and the C and then flow back out. So wouldn't it be nice? Since Bob's phone and Alice's phone are both already connecting to the outside interface of the Expressway E, wouldn't it be nice if that could do the RTP relay? Yes. And that is what turn is. There is a license on the Expressway E that you can turn on. It's the turn license. What do you know? Turn relay. And that allows the Expressway E to understand that it should connect those two endpoints for the RTP path. And simply turning on that turn relay, there's a couple of other minor things, but mostly you just have to have the license for it and turn it on in the Expressway E, and poof, it works magically, which is really nice. But again, think about it. What if I have Bob and Alice's phone and they're sitting at a remote office they're not big enough to need a VPN. So I just, a site-to-site PVPN. So I just have those two phones sitting there, right? Two people sitting next to each other. And Bob wants to say, hey, Alice, let's go to lunch. So, why would I want to have the media path flow all the way over the internet to this Expressway E and then all the way back? Can't I have that media path go directly between these devices? Theoretically, yes. There's a lot of it depends here. This happens by default. This is pretty easy to make go. This, on the other hand, there's a lot that needs to happen to make that work properly. And we'll talk a little bit about that as we go along. But from a conceptual and graphic standpoint, if you can visualize this picture, and I'm not going to lie, I took this right out of the Cisco documentation and a Cisco Live presentation, which I will post in the chat, by the way, because to me it perfectly encapsulates the problem and what these solutions do. So if you have questions about any of that, and I really didn't mention this at the beginning because many of you had been in my earlier sessions this week. If you have questions, please just shout out anytime, and we'll address the question when you have it. So that is, in a nutshell, ICE and stun and turn. So let's take a look at these one at a time. Stun, session traversal, utilities for NAT. The ability for me to connect two devices that are NATing so that I can tunnel traffic between them with either original IP addresses or for the stun turn server, the thing that is doing the stun connection, to understand that, well, you said this IP address, but really it's supposed to go to this IP address, like hairpinning the RTP path through the Expressway C. So it's a process for endpoints to negotiate your media path. Truth be told, and this is going to freak you out a little bit, ICE, Internet Connection Establishment, Interconnection, I don't know, the acronym, is involved in all of this. All of this is a process of negotiating our RTP path. And stun is the default way of having that happen. And that's because it required, up through Call Manager 12 and Expressway 12 and all that, stun required the B2B UA that is on Expressway C to be part of the negotiation path. That just, because of the way this system was built, that was required. So, or, you can turn on turn too, but, it was why it was happening the way it was happening anyway. So, yeah, so this means, again, media is anchored on the Expressway C, the outwards interface. And it's a NAT traversal tunnel through firewalls, but specifically to avoid problems of NAT. Then there is turn. And turn traversal using relays around NAT, that's what that stands for. It allows me to bridge, as I showed you in the graphic, bridge the media path on the Expressway E to its Expressway E external interface. There is no, and I have the words here, no trust, but what I'm talking about there is you don't have to do any special certificate stuff, right, with endpoints or with the expressways to get this to work. Your Expressway E should already have its external, or its certificate, its server certificate, set up to use a public CA having signed those certificates to make it work best, right? And because of that, and because the only thing, if you look at the graphic, the only thing these endpoints need to trust, they don't need to trust each other, they need to trust this guy, which they already do, because this server is signed with a with a verifiable certificate and therefore encryption keys. I don't have to do anything. You do have to have the turn license. It is not cheap. There is a capacity for that turn license as well. But then, you set up MRA like normal, you install the turn license, and then you turn it on. And that's about all you have to do to make that work. From a hardware standpoint, the 78 and 8800 series devices, they have to be running the 12.5.1 firmware, so they have to be running modern firmware. You do want to have Call Manager 12.5, preferably also. You can do earlier ones. The telepresence endpoints support this, so if you want to do a conference call between or a video call between two desktop sessions, right? Absolutely. For Jabber itself to do turn, and you know, you could turn that on with earlier versions of Call Manager and earlier versions of Expressway. For Jabber, you have to have Jabber 12.5. You need to be running the Expressway 12 series also, otherwise it wants to still go through the Expressway C and Call Manager 12.5 or later. My experience is that there's a little bit of wiggle room in that, doing that, but there you go. That's at least what's in the specs. And then ICE, Internet Interactive Connectivity Establishment. This is the actual negotiation process. So even if I'm doing stun, even if I'm doing turn, the idea that my two endpoints are negotiating where they should flow through is what ICE is about. In the case of mobile remote access, we're not just talking about ICE, we're talking specifically about ICE pass-through. And what I'm talking about there is taking a look at Bob's device here, right? As far as Call Manager is concerned, Bob has 3 different IP addresses at which he can be contacted. One of which is his actual IP address, right? He is, you know, he's at 192.168.1.10, let's just say, whatever. Now, Bob, because he's at a remote location, may be behind a firewall. And so there's going to be a public-facing IP address that is associated with the ability to get to Bob's phone. And so let's say that's, you know, 63.1.2.3, whatever. And then, of course, there is the IP address of the turn server, because that's another place that Bob can be contacted, and actually, you know, here too, for that matter. So what's going to happen is, if you do ICE, you have to engage the firewall in this process. You have to tell your Expressway C's and E's you're going to be doing this. Bob will send you know, his information to Call Manager, but as it flows through these different components, the information about who they are and, you know, where they are in the overall media path will be included in your SIP messages. And what this means is that when I'm trying to negotiate the media path between these two endpoints, as they're going, oh, let's see, you know, can I get to this IP address? No, I can't get to that IP address. Can I get to this IP address? I can't get, oh, I can get to this IP address though, right? So, you know, flowing down, you know, can I get here? If not, can I get, you know, maybe they're behind the same firewall. Can I get here? Can I get here? Can I get here? Where is the place where these two endpoints can agree on a mutually reachable IP address for their RTP path? That is what ICE does for us. And so the endpoints send multiple connection parameters. They send their own host address. They send what's known as the server reflexive address. If they have a public-facing IP, that is effectively a NAT IP, or what do they look like on the internet, they will send that. And then the relay address, the turn server. So from a media path standpoint basis, we've been talking about turn, right? So they you know, they do their negotiation, and you know, I've got this IP address, I've got this IP address, and I've got this IP address. If I want the media to flow through this pair of firewalls, these two firewalls have to trust each other. And oh, that's, you know, not always going to be an easy thing to do. So in a case like this, you know, from an easily reachable standpoint, the only IP address they can both really get to is the Expressway E. So this becomes the relay address for them to send their media paths back and forth. The server reflexive address. means that these two devices, these two endpoints, are going to be aware that there's this IP address on the internet that they can get to. And there is I wouldn't want to call it exactly a probe, but there is a message sent out saying, can I get to you on this IP address? There's a little, hey, basically like sort of like a hello packet that is attempted between these two devices to see if they can get there. There is, if you think about the idea of having a firewall get an unsolicited, because this is going to be on a different IP address and port number than anything else it's doing, right? It's going to get this unsolicited inbound connection request from this random place. Is a firewall generally going to allow that? No. So in order to do this, you would want to get these two firewalls to work together. And again, this would be like, firewalls get certificates too. They can be signed by, with the same root, their own, company's root. And then, they might be able to do this. There's some magic you have to do in the firewalls to get this to work as well. This is probably the harder one to do. Bouncing it here is, again, you just turn on turn and you're good to go. And as we'll see in a minute, the host-to-host direct, that's actually pretty easy to do too. This is the hard one. So if you've got two remote locations at, two different places, trying to get the media path to go through their firewalls. And, another example would be Bob and Sue are both in their home offices, or Bob is at a Starbucks with his Jabber client, and Sue is in her home office with a desktop unit, right? I've got firewalls here. Getting that to work, a little trickier. But the other piece of information that is sent, as you recall, is the actual IP address of the actual device. And if these two devices are behind the same firewall, they should be able to get to each other. They may even be on the same IP subnet, right? So again, they're going to send that little hello packet. They start with this one. They do the host to host, can I get you? Yes or no. And if not, then they'll try to send it to the reflexive. And then if not, they'll send it via the turn server. But this will allow them to send their traffic, their RTP traffic direct. And I cannot emphasize enough that in all cases, still, we're talking about the media. There we go. We're talking about the media only when we're talking about the signaling that is still flowing through Call Manager. So then, stun, we're doing it by default. Turn, fairly easy to stand up. You need a turn license, and you need to turn on in the Expressway E. If you want to do ICE, again, what else do I need to do? So, ICE requirements. You do have to have end-to-end encryption, and that even means, you're doing point-to-point here. This is still going to have to be encrypted. We're talking about the RTP path, because if I'm going to take this path, or again, if I've got two firewalls and I'm doing that, I need to have that RTP path encrypted so that I can verify that it's going to where it's supposed to be going and not getting read by people who shouldn't be reading it. So you have to have end-to-end encryption. This means that you will turn on mixed mode on your call manager. You will issue the hardware endpoints certificates. If you are using Jabber, Jabber needs to have the host PC or device. I mean, it could be your cell phone too, I suppose, but that device that is hosting the Jabber client, the host device needs to have a certificate that is going to be able to be used in this environment, whether that's issued by Call Manager or whether the host device has a certificate that's trustable by Call Manager, but we have to be in agreement there. Jabber has to be enabled for this. This is not something that Jabber does automatically. There's another one of the Jabber parameters in the parameter guide. You'll see it. that you need to turn on to make sure Jabber knows it's allowed to do this or supposed to do this. And so you'll have end-to-end encryption. You always have encrypted, you always have encrypted signaling anyway, but now you're going to have encrypted media. There is a couple of more things that have to happen here as well. The phones have to have a phone security profile built in Call Manager, which tells them they're allowed to do these techniques. The phone security profiles have to be part of the certificates when you're issuing the certificates for your Expressway C and Expressway E. There's some magic in there. So read the deployment guide. But it's once you stand up the mixed mode and you get your certificates done, that's really the only hard part. Now, hardware clients can get the hardware certificates. And it is either that endpoint or it's not that endpoint. That one's pretty straightforward. But if you think about Jabber, Jabber's, it's software. It is software riding on top of an operating system, which is, what do you know, software. So I need to be able to do authentication, and not just authentication, but authorization. So you're going to need to set up SIP OAuth as part of your Jabber deployment, which is not a bad thing to do anyway. So you're going to need an identity provider and SSO and all that good stuff, and then authorize the endpoint to do that. So ICE, like I said, stun is done by default. Turn is not hard to do. Get a license, turn it on, you're good to go. If you want to do ICE, there's quite a bit in there. But if you have a lot of external endpoints running MRA, especially if you've got a multi-state or multi-country deployment of your MRAs, and even more especially if you have more than one Expressway E cluster out there and endpoints might be calling between them, you want to do this if you possibly can. That the amount of traffic that does not need to flow through your Expressway E, the speed enhancements for doing direct RTP path, it's going to make the calls sound better, the video look better. All of these things are of benefit. So if you've got, especially a large organization, this is absolutely something that I highly encourage you to go investigate. And so ends my conversation about the three terms, what they mean, and what you need to do, at least in the basics, to get them running. So this one was a shorter one than some of the other ones. What questions can I answer? Who has, is there anything else I can explain a little further? What can I do for you guys?
Hi, Maran, Ravina here. I have
Yes,
just one question.
Mhm.
So, considering our current environment, we say if I have an enterprise CUCM where I do not have the mixed mode enable,
Uh-huh.
and I'm deploying of small offices where I want to deploy these MRA phones,
Mhm.
and with ICE implemented on it, can I do it like just assigning phone security profile to just those small offices phone and do not enable security for the whole enterprise and just change the parameter to mixed mode? Is it doable?
I think what you're asking is,
Mm-hmm.
if I turn on mixed mode, can I be selective about which devices are going to have certificates and are going to be encrypted? Absolutely. So yes, if you
Okay.
turn on mixed mode, that does not require you to have everything in your enterprise encrypted. No. I will say though that if you do have a lot of, insecure versus unsecure, pay attention especially to your media resources, things like conference bridges and whatnot. There are some service parameters, especially in the Call Manager service, regarding, what happens if a device that's doing security is talking to a device that's not doing security, and blah, blah, blah. There's some niceties in there with regards to that. So you may find that you're going to need to have a, so I've got Call Manager and I've got, a media resource server, let's say a conference bridge, right? And I've got an on-prem phone, and then I've got my Expressway CE pair,
Mm-hmm.
right? And firewalls. I mean, obviously, I'm leaving the firewalls out of the picture, but just assume they're there, right?
Yeah.
And then I've got, let's say a DX over here. So if my conference bridge is on-prem, it's not going to be a problem because the conference bridge, I'm going to be sending my media path through the Expressway E anyway, and that's fine. If though I have two endpoints out here, and especially if you want to do video conferencing, then how do I get them to get to this conference bridge? By default, they will go through this conference bridge.
Yeah. Okay.
But what you can also do is have what's known as a trusted relay point. If you've ever set up a conference bridge, I don't know if you've ever seen that checkbox right there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. And again, there's more to do with that. But effectively what you're doing is you're going to be designating an IP address somewhere else, right? It could be out on the internet, they could be, and you're going to set up an encryption between that and that external system. And then these guys can talk to it. And it's still going to flow through the conference bridge, but now, I'm sorry, I'd have that backwards, excuse me. Right. This is if you have a conference bridge on the outside. Gosh, it's been a while since I've thought about this. Okay. So you have a conference bridge on the outside, and it might not be, I'm not talking about, hanging out on the internet, but I'm talking about like you might have a conference bridge in your DMZ, right? You can set up this as a trusted relay point. You give it basically an internal IP address that people can use. So I can have internal devices talking to it also. But then this becomes part of the ICE negotiation process, and these guys can flow through that, which, I mean, in a way they would be anyway, but at least they're not sending it through here. So a conference, anyway, just conferencing gets a little more complicated. Media resources get a little more complicated when you're mixing secure and non-secure endpoints. But it's absolutely doable. And no, you do not, once you turn on mixed mode, you do not have to have every phone in your system encrypted. Absolutely not.
Got it. Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much.
Yep, no problem. Gosh, I hope I did that drawing right. I have to think about that. Oh, and since I'm thinking about it, let me upload into the chat the presentation that I attended in Cisco Live 2019 about this. This is the PDF and it has some information in it. If you go, you can go get the recording and go watch the recording. That guy was terrific. I would sit through that session again because that's how good it was. So let me get that out for you. Here we are. There. And that's, you'll see, I thought it was a great summary. And it talks in more detail also in there about what the messages look like as it's tacking on the additional contact addresses as part of the ICE negotiation. And it talks a little bit more about what has to happen on the firewalls to get them to be able to accept those inbound connections, etc. And then of course, there's always a Cisco documentation, but hey, let's start with the basics, go with a little bit more complicated, and then read the Cisco documentation, right? Yeah.
So it's Lance here. I got another quick question for you.
Yes, sir.
Okay, on this one with the whole COVID thing, we've had to do a rapid deployment of Expressway C and E, and really what that's doing is that's going out to, at this point, mobile devices. Right now, I'm assuming basically with a mobile device, it's going to carry the same call flow as even if we had an MRA phone basically sitting out there as well, where it's going to come all the way back from the E to the C and into the call manager and back out. So if we enable turn, license and do turn, then we are essentially, even on mobile devices, we're reducing that traffic. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then what about
if again, you have to be running Jabber clients 12.5 and later. You need to have call manager 12.5 and later.
That's our problem. That's next on the list. Okay.
It's so I'm told, truth be told, give it a try. You can always enable, get the turn license because you're going to want to do it eventually anyway, even if you have not upgraded your call manager. But it's like they keep reading the documentation that you have to have call manager 12.5 or later to do this. And I can't think of any good reason why. So go ahead and get the turn license, even get a minimal one, try it out and see what happens. You can see in the Expressway E the Expressway E log files, you'll see the turn happening.
Yeah, because we just went through a major thing that Ravina and we worked together, and because with the MRA devices for iOS, they were always getting prompted for certificates, so Jabber wasn't even ringing, and that ended up being exactly what you say. It's the OAuth, because our Unity was 11.5 SU3, and ZOauth and basically OAuth is not supported until SU8.
Yeah.
And we have a number of TAC engineers tell us, so it's not going to be available until 12. Well, our hardware doesn't support 12 until we replace that now. So we were into this limbo, and then one of the engineers came back and says, SU8 supports it. We did it, and it just works beautifully now.
Fabulous. I forgot about the OAuth. Of course it does for Jabber. I keep thinking about hardware endpoints. Yeah. Good. So you got it. So it was the Unity connection that was the hang up, but not the call manager?
The Unity connection was a hang up for OAuth, yes.
Okay. And you're running what version now? There's an SU8 of what?
Yeah, 11.5 SU8.
There's an SU8. Holy smokes. Okay.
Yeah. So,
love it. So 11.5 SU8 of Unity connection. And what version of call manager are you running?
11.5 as well. I'm not sure. I'll know in a sec here. But yeah, it's in the 11.5. Do you recall, Ravina? I think that's still
SU7. Yeah, SU7.
Okay.
So call manager 11.5 SU7, Unity connection 11.5 SU8. You were able to set up the SIP OAuth and get the Jabber clients to do turn? Or you're just the OAuth itself you got running?
Just OAuth. Just OAuth. We're not,
if you can get OAuth running on, I don't see any reason why. If you have OAuth running on Call Manager and on Unity Connection, and you've got the turn license, I don't see any reason why it wouldn't work. All the documentation says 12.5, but give it a shot. I cannot tell you the number of times I've seen the wrong stuff in Cisco documentation. It could be that TAC won't support it, but that doesn't mean it won't work.
Yeah. If TAC doesn't support it, we're not doing it.
Oh, okay. Well, then I think you're stuck having to wait till upgrade to 12.5. Yeah. So, I mean, you're on virtual machines. Oh, you have to upgrade like your UCS blades before you can.
Yeah, we've got 2 to 3 UCS blades that basically are going to go end of support the end of next year. So.
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Off topic, since nobody else got questions, I do have one other question since we're on MRA. So I understand there's a process with the 8845 with the cameras. Okay, so we are basically, and Ravina, correct me if I'm wrong here, we are set to SSO only on our Expressway E's. There's no LDAP, all right? We're just not allowed it because we have to have dual factor authentication through our corporation.
Okay.
I understand there's a way, is this only in Call Manager 12, where you can create it's almost like a barcode on
a QR code or the onboarding device? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Like how do you register a physical IP phone through MRA?
No, I only have 12.5 servers handy. I think I finally nuked all of our 11.5 servers. Let me get into
okay.
Let me get into Call Manager Admin. Oh, duh, I can do it through the navigation. Okay. It's momentito. So there is an activation, device activation. There's a device activation service that's built into Call Manager 12, certainly 12.5. I'm not sure about 12.0, but certainly in 12.5. Okay. When you build a new device, add a new one. You said you have like what, an 8845?
Yeah, because we're starting to order devices with cameras for remote sites, so that we can get this something past security where they'll be happy with how this authenticates instead of the LDAP. And the 8845s are cheaper than the 8851s. Go figure.
I am not familiar enough with the differences between the two.
So the 8845 has a built-in camera. 8851 is your standard, basically SIP, color phone.
Okay, and yeah, and you said the 8845s are cheaper than the 51s?
Yes, by $30.
Cisco's pushing video. They want you to use video because you know what? Then you need video conferencing equipment, and that's expensive. Exactly. All right. So this is it. Require activation code for onboarding. you do the allow activation code, and to actually generate the QR code, once you build this and you set up this phone security profile and all that stuff, the QR code is generated, and you can print it out and just show it to the camera. You can also alternately, if you don't have a camera or if you just don't want to use the QR code, you can, there's a code that you generate here and then you press it in on the phone. And that's how it's done.
Okay, and I'm looking at ours right now, and you're right. I do not, you just went to basically create new device, new 8845, and then, yeah.
And once I save it, it's there too. I mean, it's not like that's only on the create new page. It's like once, oh, I don't have this all this stuff in. Yeah, it is late. It is configurable later.
Yeah.
It is changeable later.
Yeah, and I understand that the Jabber options are a lot more granular as well once we get to 12.5 as well.
How do you mean? Oh, yes. With Jabber. So the Jabber config XML file is, what you need anytime you want to do anything non-default. Thank God you don't have to have it anymore, but even though you have to have it. Starting with 12, this is not even 12.5, but starting with 12, when I'm setting up my UC services, right, my individual services, one of the services that I can set up is a Jabber config XML file.
Oh.
And so this allows you, if you have 1,000 users, you could create 1,000 different Jabber config XML files. They'd all have their own profile, each profile now. So each service profile will have its own Jabber config XML. This makes it very, very easy to group different Jabber clients to have their own set of settings. And anything you can think of. I mean, I cannot tell you, gosh, let's see, policies, boom, right? So anything you can think of in the Jabber parameters, it's in here somewhere.
So you're under UC service? Yeah, UC service configuration.
Yep, UC service.
Yeah.
And then when you set up the service profile, one of the new things also in 12.5 is at the very bottom, they have a section for which Jabber config XML file goes. And you can have you can have the same service profile and have two different Jabber config XMLs based on whether that service profile is talking to a desktop client or a mobile client.
Cool.
Or you can have one for everybody. So that means that if you have, Bob, and Bob has Jabber for Windows and also Jabber on his iPhone, you don't have to have a different service profile to two different CS. I mean, you have to have two different CSF devices, but Bob, the user account, only has to have one service profile, and it will do the right settings for the two different kinds of devices.
Yeah. So I think that's where the Jabber config XML profile is not available till 12, because it's definitely not in 11.
I know it's definitely not in 11. Okay. And I'm 99% sure it's available in 12. I know obviously for a fact it's available in 12.5, but I'm 99% sure it was available in 12. It was one of the major upgrades.
This is cool.
It is very cool.
Yeah. Looks like we're busy, Ravina.
Yeah.
When you get to spend money, that's the best part, right?
Yeah, it's not a good time to be spending money.
No, but hey, here is something to think about. It's something to help. If you can quantify time savings, if you can quantify how much time a particular feature is going to save your average worker, and then you can multiply that by payroll. And here's sort of the rule of thumb. If you can save a worker 10 minutes a day, just 10 minutes, and that's not much. Think of just about presence information, right? 10 minutes a day, that's a work week worth of time over the course of a year.
Yeah.
And so if you can quantify, I'm going to save the average worker 3 minutes a day, right? Well, that's 3 payroll days enterprise-wide. Think about the money, and they will sign.
The big thing that we're finding right now is because of COVID is now they're really looking at, okay, how often do we really need bricks and mortar? And so, when they came to us during COVID, it's like, well, here's our options. Here's the infrastructure we need to quickly stand up to support remote, because we know everybody was just call forward to their phones, hammering your PRIs. You're getting busy signals from service providers. Here, I can put your desk phone on your mobile phone. Here's what I need. Money was magically there for us to do that. So
I know. Oh, and all these jobs. Oh, there's no way this person could do this job from home, you know, and suddenly they can. Yeah.
yeah, now you can't get them back into the office.
This is going to be a major shift in think about office space, think about all of the small businesses like restaurants and cafes that rely on businesses. We're going to have a lot more, you know, home delivery of stuff. I can totally see couriers coming back into vogue. There's gonna be a major shift. I've been in the office like 3 times in the last 8 months, and that's to pick stuff up. So I'm with you. I'm going to get a plant so it's prettier to look at my teaching. What else was I going to say about that? Oh yeah, and where are you? You sound like you're from the upper Midwest. I would say northern Minnesota.
How about Vancouver, Canada?
Oh, Vancouver. Okay.
Yeah.
Same diff.
There, I'll put camera on here.
There you go.
Yeah. And Ravina is, well, I'll let Ravina tell you.
Yeah, I'm here in Toronto, East.
Also Toronto. I'm from Minnesota, and I for Lance, I totally heard the upper Midwest accent.
So I just haven't had enough A's in yet.
Oh,
How's it going, eh?
it's so it's completely off topic. So by the time the movie Fargo came out, I was living out east, and a bunch of friends of mine and I sat down and we watched the movie, and everybody started making fun of the Minnesota accent. And I'm like, oh, we don't talk like that. We really don't. So I called back to my girlfriend who lived up north, as we say. And she lives in Virginia, Minnesota, which is right up by the border. And I chit-chatted with her husband, and he said, so suppose you want to talk to my wife then? So yes, obviously we do talk like that up there.
Too funny.
Yeah. so forgive me. That was way far afield. Let me throw out. Does anybody else have any questions about anything? We're close to the Q&A portion at any rate. And it can be call manager, Unity Connection, Cisco Emergency Responder, Expressways, VCS. I've got access to it all. So if you've got a question, I'm happy to answer whatever I can. I'm busy out on the Cisco support forums too. I don't know if you guys are aware of that. The Cisco support forum, supportforums.cisco.com. If you've got a weird question, or you run into some weird error and you can't find stuff on it, go post out there. People like me and people much smarter than me go and answer questions out there. And we are always happy to help if we can. I mean, I teach for a living. I could make more money doing field engineering, but I like teaching, so I do.
Okay, I got
like
another question for you since nobody else is jumping in.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, on Expressway, we're actually going through this tonight because our system in team, they're updating hosts, so we have to move the Expressway E's over. Now, Expressway E's do not support active vMotion. Is that correct? You have to turn it down for vMotion.
I don't know. That is not. I've never done it. I've never read about it, so I don't know.
Okay, so segue into that one then. Is there a way to basically, because we have 2 Expressway E's, okay, so they're redundant, is there a way to, like on a PRI, we can shut down B channels and have them so not available? Is there a way we can shut down so active sessions will stay up, but no additional sessions will complete to that particular expressway? So we're offloading onto one expressway so we can migrate one over, and then we can spin that up, put the sessions over in that one, just for clean failover instead of hard outages for users.
I believe so. Let's see. Actually, it would be 20.
No pressure.
20, because I've got. Lee Can is saying yes, it's absolutely possible.
And we are on
Lee Can, if you would be interested in, I know you're a little shy, but if you'd be interested in sharing that experience, that would be awesome. I'm bringing up an Expressway E right now just to see. Of course, this is just an MRA. It's not the full-blown VCS, so it may not have the feature. So let's look at this together, shall we? Okay, let's see. So
the first thing we were trying to figure out is how can we easily find out what sessions are actually active on the Expressway?
Oh, yeah, you can
Okay.
go to, not calls, yeah, calls, just regular old calls. That'll show you all your current calls.
Yes. If you navigate to status calls,
It calls
it
calls,
shows
yeah.
you the calls.
Hmm.
But if you want to see the sessions, the MRE sessions, you go to status, unified communication
Right.
status,
Also true.
and
And it will show you them, it shows you them there.
Okay. Okay. Excellent. Then bizzing out, as I would call it in my PRI world, bizzing it out so it does not take any additional sessions.
Disabling new
forces the-
sessions, Lee Ken?
Yes.
Again, I don't know how to do that. Can you walk us through that?
see. Yeah, as in you could stop service and
You could
whatever
stop what?
as in you could stop the service.
But my concern with stopping a service is it could take active. Most of our users are mobile, right? Mobile app Jabber. Is my concern with that is dropping active calls.
Yeah.
I wonder if you could temporarily set up a new call policy rule blocking new sessions. Would a call policy rule change the established sessions? I don't think it would it?
It won't change the established sessions, but
It would? Okay.
it won't. It won't.
Oh, it would not. There you can go. So you could set up a temporary call policy blocking. Well, no, because you don't want to do that because that's going to propagate to the other one and that would block all calls. We don't want to do that. I mean, unless you want to stop all new calls while you're doing, and let things gracefully shut down, then you could do it with call policy. But no,
Oh,
if you
okay.
set up a call policy to say no new sessions, it would propagate to both systems, and so that would be no new sessions. Which would at least be that, but that
Yeah.
wouldn't shut down just one of them.
Okay. Okay. It's worth a try.
Serviceability, and there might, Lake Cat says there is a way, so I'm assuming that there is.
It's interesting because there was a maintenance mode there, and I'm assuming that would be putting the host that you're working on in maintenance mode, not the cluster in maintenance mode.
Correct.
Yes,
So
that's accurate.
Does maintenance mode kill active sessions?
Let's see the documentation.
No, it
Oh, there we go.
default-
Check it out. Yes, that's exactly what you can do. Right
There
here,
we
it says new calls and registrations are disallowed, and existing registrations are allowed to.
Woohoo!
That's nice.
There you go. Again, I would test it at 2 a.m. just to make sure.
I'm testing at 5 p.m. today.
All right.
Forget that. Excellent.
I love, I have to say, I love the fact that Call Manager has like help for this page and all that stuff, but Expressway is even better. Whoever did the documentation, the Tandberg people, because they were the ones that originally came up with all this stuff, of course. Man, their documentation's awesome.
Yeah.
So, well, I helped solve a problem today in Lake Cat. Thank you very much. I'm glad Lake Cat.
Thank
I
you.
call you the wrong name.
Yeah, you
Awesome.
could by the way, you should put the subscriber as in the secondary host to maintenance mode before instead of the primary node. You understand?
Are you going to be doing those, Lance, one at a time?
That's correct. So what we'll do is we'll take the secondary one, we'll evacuate that, vMotion or shut that down, vMotion it over. I'll bring that up, take it out of maintenance mode, put primary in maintenance mode, and then do the same.
That should work.
Well, we'll find out. If not, my sysadmins are very quickly bringing them back.
I think though, given the process you're trying to go through, I think the worst that would happen is you would drop calls. It's not like the two systems are going to stop talking to each other. And as long as you're using the full vMotion where you're moving it, because you don't want to like clone it or migrate it because it will change the ID, right? So as long as you're doing that part right, you should be fine.
Yeah. Well, I rely on my senior administrators for that one, and they know what they're doing on the vMotion side. So Yeah, we'll find out, and the notice goes out. You may lose your connection to Jabber. We cover our butts as well. So
If you're going to be shutting it all the way down, I would encourage you to take a snapshot before you do the vMotion, just in case.
okay, yeah, okay,
Doesn't hurt. You can always nuke it later.
exactly, cool. Okay, well,
All
sorry,
right, I'm feeling.
monopolized your time.
No, I'm feeling smart. Bring it. Who else has questions?
Yeah, just one more.
Yes, ma'am.
Can we do SSO with the phones registering over MRA, the hard phones? The actual 8845 or 51?
Single sign-on?
Yeah. For authentication using IDP and everything. So we have SSO already implemented, and say if we deploy these hard phones, what would happen? Do we have to change the authentication method back to LDAP and SSO?
And forgive me. So I'm obviously having a senior moment. I mean, I have always interpreted SSO as being part of a username password combination for identity providers. So like Jabber clients, hard endpoints do SSO. Is that that's news to me? Again, I'm not a security expert. So do hard endpoints on-prem do SSO?
Not on-prem, no.
Yeah.
I mean, MRA, I'm specifically talking about, because if we register a phone without having SSO in picture, it will ask for user ID and password.
Yeah, so where we're going with this one is basically on a mobile device, we use Mobile Iron. So we have our corporate certificates within the workspace here, okay? The problem is that on a physical phone, it does not run Mobile Iron with our corporate certificates. So how do we register that physical phone? I know we talked about basically the barcode and stuff like that, but I guess there's no way of logging in through the phone. Like, I guess we'd have to somehow get those certificates on the physical phone before we could actually even log in, I guess.
Well, the 8845s and the 8865s, even with 11.5, can, you can, set them up with to discover. It's only those two models as far as I know, the 8845s and 8865s. You can have them discover the Expressway E, just like a Jabber client does, and it will set up. It is able to do the whole public-private key pair and send the nonce and set up encryption between the E. It doesn't have, the activation onboarding is not available, there's at that point it would be no username and password. That phone obviously would already have to exist in the call manager for it to register. But if you have auto registration on, anybody's coming in. So there's that. You don't have to have SSO turned on in order for hardware external endpoints to join the 8845s and 8865s. And you can read, there's documentation out there on how to get them to register via the Expressway, the MRA, because that's part of their purpose in life. That's one of the reasons they came out with those.
It just seemed that, like you said, when you turn on the UC services, so it goes out and it goes into discovery mode, it will find the Expressway E, but the only way we were able to originally get them going is basically by using username and password, right, was the only way to get them to log in successfully. But we had to have Expressway E set up for SSO and LDAP, and we have to remove and LDAP now, so we can't just use username and password to log in from the internet. So we'll sort this out.
But that's hard endpoint. I mean, there is no username and password that you use
to log in through the initial Expressway. That's what we ended up doing
for the for the hard phone. Yeah.
Yep. For one of these puppies right here. Well, whatever. You can't see it because of my background. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So I mean, it's one of those things where they should just sort of work if they've got access to DNS and they know what domain they're supposed to register to.
Now we'll try again now that we got the rest of the issues sorted out. It's all smoke and mirrors right now, so we'll see what happens.
I know, right?
Ones and zeros.
So I'm kind of curious about. Let's see. Register 8865 via MRA.
8845. So I think it's what these are with the camera. I need eyes. 8845 camera.
A 3. Okay. Oh. I assume that you have read the deployment documents and all that for MRA and read the
Yeah.
portions that relate to the 8845s and 8865s.
We're going to review them. Like I said, we've been so concentrated on issues with iOS devices. We
Sure.
have gone through the documentation a fair bit, even more than some TAC engineers, but we're going to revisit them.
It's
So,
for what it's worth, the 8845 and 8865 registrations, I know theoretically, because I teach in a pretty all virtualized environment, I can tell you everything you need to know about virtualized devices. The 8845s and 8865s, I've seen it happen in videos, but I have not done it myself. So I have limited ability to give you further advice on that.
Yeah. No,
but the Google is your friend.
Yeah. Well, instead of CMEs, this is why we're looking at trying to go to MRA, right? If a small devices are small locations out there, they have 3 to 6 users, it only makes sense to let's deploy a phone. You know, if you need a phone, otherwise you're going to have Jabber for Windows or whatever you need, and off you go.
Yep.
So.
Yes,
Cool.
especially for all these people with home offices, because Jabber's nice, but it's nice to just have a phone right here too.
Yes.
Or your DX or whatever.
Okay, I know we're over. I'm going to ask you one more question. Jabber for Windows.
For what it's worth, the period from 4 o'clock to 5 o'clock is the official Q&A period. I just happened to finish my earlier presentation before the hour was up. So have at it. Okay.
Jabber, like I said, Jabber's been around for a long time, but one of the other things I'm just trying to figure out is in order to get an icon, basically, so for Jabber for Windows, and I don't know if this goes on MRA devices as well, to get the picture up of the person. So like we have the Skype for Business, and you know how you have the user's profile picture and things like that. How easy is that to put up on the Jabber for Windows or on the Jabber? Is that just once again another? It's not going to be in the Jabber config XML. I'm assuming there's a.
Yeah, it will be. Well, it can be. If you're using LDAP, you can tell it to use the thumbnail photo in LDAP. I actually do it via the Jabber config XML file. Let me see if I've got a copy of that. And I will show you what I use. Yeah. I have the thumbnail photos in a folder on a Windows server. That is an IIS server, and so it's just served up. This happens to be one of the ways to do it. If you go and look at thumbnail photos, there's like 3 or 4 different ways. Let me go
because I'm assuming basically if this in our Skype environments, then they're obviously pointed to that same type of thumbnail folder or whatever within IIS. I'm probably assuming as long as it's the same parameters around the thumbnail, we'll probably be able to point to that same folder as well. I'm hoping.
So, share screen. Yeah, so it's in the way that I do it, and this is one of the ways to do it. The parameter is UDS photo with token. Let me make that a little bit bigger. There we are. UDS photo URI with token, and then where are they serviced? In this case, you have to have each user's thumbnail photo with whatever their UUID is. So, we use SAM account name, so I've got them all by SAM account name.jpg. That's it. And this can be serviced via your expressways as well. There's a setting you do. Where's my VCS? It's actually on the VCS-C. Let's see. Yeah, HTTP allow list. So you add a rule that allows external objects like Jabber clients to go reach into specific HTTP internal sources. And then the thumbnail photo should be, and I've done this via in my labs, so I know it works.
Excellent. Thank you so
much. That's one of the ways. There's a couple others.
Wonderful.
If you look at the parameters guide, they probably will talk about that. But the other thing you can do, I don't know if you're familiar with the Jabber configurator, the Jabber config XML generator.
Yes, that has a list longer than my arm of different options.
Yes, it does. But there is a smaller section for how to do the thumbnails. There's like 3 or 4 in there, but if you look at them individually, it will tell you a little bit about the parameters, and that'll help you go find the documentation. That's what I
Okay.
was thinking about that.
Got it.
Okay.
Wonderful.
Oh my God, yes, and it's like it grows and grows every version, man. It's just crazy now. I'm so
Yeah.
glad that they put it into Call Manager. It makes it more flexible, and it makes it, I think, much easier to work with.